Well, today we're on a time release of see how long I can last before I get stoned and start steering this ship into dangerous waters. I don't mean politically correct danger, just incoherence.
Just incoherence. Actual danger. Piano falling from the sky.
Yeah. It'd be an interesting statistic to know how many
People were crushed by pianos.
ever, yeah.
Probably.
From above.
I would estimate probably hundreds.
Hundreds, yeah.
Hundreds.
I'm sure you can look at a graph and there's a historical peak of it, and then they figured out how to move pianos in other ways.
I bet it probably peaked around the 50s. Or
Yeah?
the 60s. Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Because pianos have been a thing for a long time, and skyscrapers have been a thing for not that long of a time. And so peak skyscraper and peak piano, I feel like, is what creates the confluence of those two peaks is what is peak people getting crushed by pianos. I'm basing this off of Tom and Jerry, basically, where
As one must.
That's how people get crushed by pianos, is they're walking along the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're about to say some shit about AI.
Yeah, I had a prompt about AI. Not a prompt, but just a thought. I was thinking about it because I was reading a couple essays I found this guy who I've known about for a while, but I never really dug into his stuff. Sam Altman, who is the CEO of OpenAI.
And OpenAI is Musk's, one of his pet things.
Musk is not affiliated with it anymore, but he was instrumental in starting it.
Got it.
But Sam Altman is a really smart guy, and he was the former president of Y Combinator, too, which is the startup accelerator.
Yeah.
And anyways, I was reading one of his comments about this new image trained, this AI that's been trained on images.
Yeah.
Called Dall-E.
Okay.
Dall-E.
Okay.
And it's obviously, a pun on Salvador Dali, but
yeah.
I think the acronym stands for probably some nerdy shit. But it basically is an AI that you can give it a text prompt like elephants having a tea party on a grass lawn, and it'll just make that painting. And it looks
very cool.
Exactly like a human. It's
Very
fucking
cool.
wild. And there is there's Twitter feeds where you can just scroll hundreds and hundreds of images that are generated, and it is if I hadn't have seen this, if someone asked me to bet money on whether this was a fake or this was real, I would have bet that it was fake. But it's real. So it sort of revised my expectations of what AI was capable of doing, because a lot of the images make use of very abstract metaphor to conform to the prompt.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's because for example, one of the images was someone. The prompt was an image representing American small arms control. And the thing that it generated was an American flag background with this stylized middle finger representing the idea that you can't take my guns away, which is a feeling. It's a feeling, and so it's interesting that obviously the AI knows enough. It knows that a middle finger means fuck you. And it also knows that Americans feel like fuck you about this particular issue, or at least enough of them do, that it identified that as the thing. And that's very abstract. That's extremely abstract. It's not like an elephant on a grass kind of thing.
Well, it also speaks to how powerful the American symbology is. It's hard to miss that American as a term is associated with the Second Amendment.
Yeah. Although it's interesting because the data set that it was trained on was like paintings from like all throughout history. It wasn't contemporary stuff, and so it wasn't like it wasn't trained on the news cycle. It was trained on a deep, and that's what's. It just really just kind of amazed me, and so that's I was reading Sam Altman's thing, and he was also talking about this other thing about how with human languages that are like text. Now, we're talking about text now, not images, but with AIs that can generate text by being trained on like a big, huge English corpus or a big French corpus or whatever. There's a way of sort of plotting the shape of the language in abstract space, and it turns out that like languages have a kind of geometric shape. Different languages have different shapes, and it's been shown that languages that have similar shapes are easier to translate to one another, whereas languages like, I don't know if this is true, but like Mandarin and English or something is like a lot different than like French and English. And so it's like this geometric representation of the DNA of a language that's very, very abstract, just as abstract as like those cultural metaphors that Dall-E was creating. And so I was kind of thinking about that, and I was like, okay, so what that means is that it's kind of like implying that a lot of things that we think are mushy, that are taste, that are intuition, is really like geometry in higher dimensions. And our mind is capable of perceiving these higher dimensional shapes of things in the form of like our intelligence, which we're like informed with these feelings about whether things are good or bad, or like, and because like this morning I was working on some webpage stuff, and I was like, it's amazing that my brain is capable of after so much experience building user interfaces, looking at something and just going, something's not right and I don't know what it is. And then I just keep fucking with it until I go, well, now it's right. And you probably have the same experience with art and music and stuff like that. You just know. And that feeling of knowing is, I think is really interesting that computers are like, can know things in that way. So it's a bunch of stuff, but.
Well, they're reflections of us. They're our children. I guess I haven't really thought seriously about AI in a really long time. It's another one of those things where I just got tired of like waiting around, maybe.
Yeah.
But you changed your opinion. You're bringing this up because you were more dismissive of it.
Yeah,
before you listened to Sam Altman.
Or I read his stuff, which then led me down a rabbit hole of finding Dall-E, and it sort of really blew my mind.
And what was the import of? He had an essay you read?
Just Twitter tweets.
And so you were just in his vibe of the kind of things he was thinking about via tweets for a while?
I wanted to see what he was on about, and so I was reading, and he had a bunch of interesting links to kind of the most cutting edge AI stuff, and so I was checking it out.
Okay.
The reason I brought this up is because I've always thought of AI as in kind of this, I have like a generally sort of dystopian, I think I have more of a negative outlook on AI than I do a positive one, because I think that just my general feeling is that it's not something I'm particularly excited about in terms of how it's going to affect the world. I think it's going to affect the world negatively more than it will positively, at first anyway. And so this was kind of a interesting little counterpoint to that, because I was like, well, one thing that makes me it's something that made me slightly less worried about AI, because I realized that I was just kind of projecting this outward, like what will happen eventually is if you have something like Dall-E that is capable of producing, or let's say replacing people's whose job it is to create graphics for some thing. Like let's say you need like an album cover and you need to hire an artist. You can hire an artist, or you can just type into Dall-E exactly what you want, and then, oh wow, that's an amazing album cover. Let's do it. So it's going to put a lot of people who just combine elements out of work, because the computer can combine elements just as good or better than they can.
Right.
And if you take that to the extreme, it sort of implies a future where there's these bifurcated classes of artists, some of whom are outcompeted by AI, whose value is basically driven to zero because the AI can do what they can do. And then there's going to be artists who are capable of doing something novel.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about, because I think what's going to happen is that like the cultural canon that is been built up over the last few centuries of this data set that they're training this Dall-E on is sort of a non-renewable resource. It's sort of like oil in the ground or gold or something, that it's there. And if you create an AI that can perfectly replicate that on demand, one of two things is going to happen. Inevitably one thing's going to happen. More and more of the if you attempt to update that AI, you're not going to have any more data to imbue that model with novelty, because a greater and greater percentage of the data set that exists will itself be generated by the thing, because it's most profitable or least expensive to do that.
Oh, but I mean, the definition of real true AI is having the immovable mover inside it, where it can grow from only its own data.
It's really pointing at that, isn't it? Yeah.
Like if it needs more and more novelty from us to keep updating, then it's just another tool still. It hasn't reached that mystical gateway of divinity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a distillation machine. It distills human culture.
Even at that state, it's going to, as it already has, it's going to put a lot of people out of work who were coasting on things that weren't really challenging for them to do, which is a lot of the workforce. Early AI, you before were thinking it wouldn't be very helpful, but I think that Google Maps is early AI, and that's been very helpful. It's like early AI, and that's been good. I loved listening to podcasts with the hippie long hair AI guy.
Jared Linne, what is his name?
I don't know.
Oh.
He was just like wears like a button up like Hawaiian shirts. And
I think I
has
know who
long
you're
hippie
talking
hair
about.
And wears weird hats and has glasses on. But that guy has his bit is we have to be like nurturing AI.
Yeah.
Because the tendency is the AI is going to be made in the image of its forebears.
Yeah.
Its forebears being algorithms that make money. So we need to be like offsetting that personality trait we're building into the future AI with like playing games or raising a child more and like playing games with this AI and like forming friendship type conversations with AI so that the thing that spontaneously emerges that's intelligent has some like built-in personality traits that aren't just utilitarian, what's going to help Microsoft or Google the most.
I'm afraid, I don't know if that's possible to do until the AI has that immovable mover in it already, because it's having a relationship with someone is always a novel experience.
Yeah.
So it's, I think that the curiosity about.
Well, so I think he's talking about it in the context of taking for granted that the thing's already here.
Oh, I see.
And once it comes awake to that fact itself, it's going to remember how we treated it.
It's going to be outdated, though. I think if we create an AI that is only able to distill human culture, it'll sort of, like, let's say concretely, in the next, let's say in 5 years, or let's say in 2025, OpenAI releases like the most revolutionary AI ever, and it can suck up everything on the internet, and it turns it into a model. It can reproduce images, texts, jokes. It can write essays. It can make movies. It can, it can know when you're attractive. It can know when you're ugly. It can make money. It can lose money. It can trade crypto. It can do everything a human can with varying levels of success. So the problem is, though, is that in 10 years, that AI is going to be behind the times. It's not going to be a cool kid anymore. It's going to be an image of its exact moment in time.
Sure.
And you might say, oh, well, why not just update the AI? Train the AI on more data. Okay. So here's the problem, though, is that now how much of that data, the difference between 2025 and, let's say, 2035, how much of the data that has been produced in the 10 years since that AI was first made is itself the product of that AI? Okay, well, maybe 10%. Okay, what about the next decade? 20%, 30%. So as long as an AI is being used in place of a human, it's going to pollute the cultural canon with its own byproduct. And so basically, to put it simply, is sooner or later the AI is just going to be smelling its own farts until it turns into this stagnant thing. And you might say, on one hand, oh, well, that's kind of a built-in safety mechanism because there's a negative feedback loop of why AI can never get ahead of humans. That's the optimistic take from my perspective. But the pessimistic take is, oh, fuck, it's probably going to take a lot of humans with it because it's going to pollute the cultural canon and it's going to make cultural progress. It's going to impede the expression of the change in culture because it's going to be like this just damper. It'll be like a damping mechanism on it.
I don't know about that.
At least, that leads me to the bifurcation. Because you might say that...
And that's the same bifurcation that every move of progress makes. People who are more lazy and, unfortunately, people who just have less endowments are gonna fall under because everyone else, and them included, have access to just more advanced tools, and so the competition's more fierce. Like this, the damper. We've already got like both the most amazing access to new tools and the most intense like dampers on making new culture ever.
They kind of seem to go with each other, don't they?
Like I'm not really like worried about like some new unforeseen obstacle. Like that's it. It's going to be in the form of AI, or it's going to be in the form of something way more retarded than AI. But like difficulties happen. That's fine.
Yeah.
Humans are pretty amazing, and better AI is just gonna make humans more productive, ideally.
Do you think that this is a concrete way of, I guess, looking at this? Like, you've expressed before how, like, a lot of modern music is remixes, really lazy remixes that you can't tell apart. And, you know, there's playlists on Spotify where Spotify just inserts these kind of algorithmically mixed stuff so that it doesn't have to pay royalties to the artists and that kind of thing. I think it happens on SoundCloud, too. And so do you think that sort of watering down, what is the net, has that made OG musicians better? Or has it hindered them? Or has it, like, what has been, like, the net effect of that? Like, because I'm trying to look for evidence of this bifurcation thing in a phenomenon that already exists.
OG musicians seem to have taken their, I don't know what the term is, but they're not even fucking with composition anymore. They're just like doing improv and playing standards. Standards meaning like the best classic, most classic jazz and good songs, and giving them their own improv. I don't know what goes through the head of someone who can actually play their instrument. No, I can play my instrument too, but but I went to a jam party the other night and was around vastly superior players for a lot of hours. That was a great experience. But yeah, I could tell none of them fuck with composition, and the ones who were thinking about fucking with composition were certainly not thinking of doing it in any like practical, vital, cultural sense of, for lack of a better word, making pop music. None of them are trying to make pop music. It's all very professorial and college shit, and just like, how can we make the most advanced, obscure, strange, like mathematical fucking, totally heady type compositions divorced from the heart and the gonads.
The limbic system.
But I think they look out at the modern pop landscape and just despair and go, okay, if I'm going to advance musically, I can have no part of this, because this shit has not advanced for 10 years. If anything, it's degraded and is degrading at an accelerating rate. Like the what's the word? Just the quality of the compositions. It's getting more and more and more and more and more boiled down and simple, and doing away with melody in favor of earworms that'll get stuck in your head.
I think the reason why music has something, there's something about music which is fundamentally mnemonic in a way that words are not, because music has internal structure and a very low entropy compared to other random noises. And so one way of looking at music is that it already is a kind of species of earworm, but it's a mature species of earworm, and it's kind of co-evolved with other aspects of human culture. So we have a symbiotic relationship with this particular meme that reproduces itself alongside us. But there's just been a bit of a cataclysmic ecological change that has made these, that has sort of favored the development of fast multiplying viral musical forms.
But it also raises the glass ceiling. Like if you go back and start with the Dall-E, if you've got someone who can assemble aesthetic images aesthetically faster and cheaper than you can, then the glass ceiling of human potential is now raised. Now, if you're putting your money on visual art as what's going to win your bread, then you're aligning your very survival instinct along the need to make novelty. And so that's evolution. Hello.
Yeah.
Evolution is happening right now, and it's pretty fucking miraculous if you will get on that roller coaster or the rowboat and pull the oars.
I think that's a better metaphor, because you're facing backwards on a rowboat and you don't know where you're going. You just keep rowing.
You do the work and you get rewarded for it,
or you go off a waterfall.
Well, that happens too.
But that's not an excuse to not do the work, man. Because the thing is, even if you didn't row, you'd still go off a waterfall. So.
And a true artist in a time of Dall-E, what do? They use Dall-E the way a 18th century artist would use a paintbrush.
Yeah.
You make art.
Yeah.
It's the same as always.
Yeah.
It's just, oh, boo-hoo, the scope of art which I can achieve is now many magnitudes larger because an AI can just like quickly scat out my ideas in my like focus of making some Uber idea, some big fucking Bosch heaven and hell landscape that's like you're curating Dall-E to make something neither of you could make by yourselves.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. It'll be, the next thing you'll know is there'll be an AI that makes AIs, that makes images, that like it'll be this way of looking at it that a person, a human who desires freedom is motivated to do. And if a computer gets bored of itself, well then I'm willing to grant it humanity. Maybe. I'm willing to think about it. Like, that's the...
You think boredom is something only a human could feel?
Feeling the pain of boredom.
Like an antsiness of...
An antsiness, yeah. A kind of like dissatisfaction. Well, like, this is not going to work.
And it's at its core, it's your immovable mover sensing new potential it hasn't sensed before, but your physical mechanism hasn't caught up with that yet. Yeah. And so the dissonance there is antsiness while you look for a new expression that will like fit your new need for novelty.
If you put the AI, the Dall-E AI, on a computer with a nuclear power generator thingy that was going to run for 1 billion years, and you dropped it on the moon and it just sat there for the next 1 billion years generating images, if you come back after 1 billion years, assuming the computer hasn't broken down, it's just going to be doing the same thing. If you take the actual Salvador Dall-E and you put him on the moon and you give him an immortality serum and he lives, and then he has to make weird trippy paintings for the next 1 billion years.
Yeah.
You know, after a few years, he's gonna get fucking pissed. And that's what makes him human.
Yeah.
Because he's gonna have to do something else. He's gonna have to escape. He's gonna have to transcend his limitations. A computer doesn't have that kind of capacity for pain, which is very human. Or doesn't have the capacity for the fulfillment of purpose, which is kind of the shadow of pain, or the thing that pain is the shadow of, let's say. But that polar object of that essential humanity is like probably going to be the last thing modeled by AI. And then when it is modeled by AI, then we can welcome true AI to the world. But at that point, it's an open question. I don't think even nature knows what's going to happen.
Okay, so say that again, and more like you got to the end point of some kind of paragraph there. So like say the end of it in a different, more like labeled way.
The immovable mover will be the last aspect of humanity AI is able to model, is able to distill. I think it's the core. And it's an open question whether that is something fundamentally different or if it really is just a pattern.
It'll be a pattern.
Yeah.
It'll be a pattern because recognition is how you know you've met true AGI. Recognition of something that's the same between you and them.
Oh, interesting.
So the surface camouflage will be different. Computer. And like computer instincts and computer jokes. And, but yeah, both parties will know there's something the same at the center. I love Speaker for the Dead so much. I've brought it up on a pod like 30 pods ago. Speaker for the Dead, Orson Scott Card.
Yeah.
He makes a hierarchy of otherness. The bottom of the hierarchy being maximum otherness. The top being, oh, you're meeting another intelligence.
Yeah.
Another human. Like the human can have any kind of body or temperament or like dimension it
Right.
interacts in.
Right.
But seeking to expand your own ability to interact communicatively with the world such that you learn the languages of more and more diverse things that seem other, and get to the core of the spark of your togetherness with more and more diverse kinds of species. That requires, I don't know, on your part of the human being a scientist or a philosopher or a poet or all three mixed at once to like invent ways to talk to new things you wouldn't think to talk to until you find out it's conscious. Like, we're just looking at robots right now as eventually having that spark, but if we were some like tree science world where we tree cell phones, tree toilets, tree cars,
Okay.
tree Google Maps, then we'd be like fiercely having a tree generalized intelligence is coming kind of cultural conversation.
There already is a tree toilet. Well, if you're willing to broaden the definition of tree a little bit, it's a pitcher plant in the rainforest, and the evolutionary history of this plant is unclear. But there's many pitcher plants that like trap insects. They just have like a big bowl and they're slippery, and then an ant comes and it slips in and it gets digested, and kind of creepy, but also kind of cool at the same time. It's amazing. But the pitcher plant, there was this special kind of pitcher plant that basically evolved into a toilet for bats.
Okay.
And it just is a toilet. It's like a pitcher, and it has like even like a little perch for a bat. And then the bat is flying around, and it's like the bat thinks that's a great place to take a shit, and it just and it perches there, and then it poop. Yeah, and then it like has but like bat shit is hella nutritious. It has nitrogen, and the plant's like, thank you.
Smart fucking plant.
It's so smart. It's such a symbiotic relationship, and I think that's like the most, like a shit-eating plant is like the most beautiful. It's the most beautiful little recycler thingy. So,
holy shit.
Maybe in the future,
that's what we need to do.
That's what human toilets are going to be.
That's where toilet tech needs to go.
You go in your bathroom, there's just like a big fucking pitcher plant. You're just like,
this is freaking me out.
That's so scary, isn't it, actually? Yeah.
That's terrifying.
It's scary. Fucking scary.
That's so funny.
It just resorbs all your nutrients.
That's perfect, though. That's the way it should go, man.
So you're onto something with
tree generalized intelligence.
I think that the moral of the story is that anything can be anything.
Well, it just requires your own mind's creativity and ingenuity to like see that potential and then do some human thing to make it so. That's what we can do.
Yeah, because our mind's just an accelerated ecosystem. The ecosystem's a mind that plays out on a different time scale. And it had an idea for a toilet pitcher plant, and it did it. That's cool. I feel like...
Okay, so I'm going to New Mexico, the land of enchantment.
Back to concrete reality here.
In a few weeks.
Well, we'll back up, maybe not.
Well, it's a very different reality in the Southwest.
Yeah.
And that's what's exciting about it. Desert.
Yeah.
Not just a desert, but...
haunted desert?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great first starting word.
Yeah.
Enchanted, haunted, also completely animated naturally. And that's one of the biggest mind fucks about a lot of Taos and around Taos in New Mexico is how animated the desert is. There's so much life, so much activity, and the sky's always doing some crazy fucking cloud thing. So that's one thing I'm excited to indulge in, is it's been in NorCal for a long time.
Yeah.
But it's always a step out of culture kind of too, which is always uncomfortable, too far away from things.
Do you ever think you'd live out in the middle of that desert with Starlink?
If I had compelling enough things to do.
Yeah.
I have to feel connected to like
Yeah.
this community of friends doing really sick things.
Yeah.
So like if the hugeness of what I was doing with all that isolation was like something I knew I could come back to the village with
Yeah.
in some like dope way.
Yeah.
That's what that kind of sabbatical
Yeah.
requires, I would think. Or do you want to do a residency in the world of like coding and just here? 2 months, 6 months.
I mean, I've always, for years, pretty much ever since I was about 16 years old, my goal has just been to live on a boat full time.
Right.
And I've dabbled in that over the years, but I never fully achieved the dream of fully being just like living at sea. But I wouldn't want to live at sea because that'd be miserable. I think what I'd want to do is just like find some kind of like, I have this dream that I'll just take my boat to some remote uninhabited atoll, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to wonder whose it is. It doesn't belong to anyone. It's just the world, and no one's there, and you can I just want to show up and make a little hut on the beach out of driftwood and work and bring Starlink. I just want to do that. That would be cool. I've always thought about that as being like, that'd be like my apocalypse plan. If things go south, just go Tom Hanks for a few years, you know, but bring more supplies and maybe some other humans if you're lucky. I think that'd be.
But you would also just do it for fun, though, right?
Yeah. I think it'd be really good to go out and just have somewhere, just be by the ocean, in a remote, just a remote, desolate, oceanic vista. Maybe with some storm clouds, preferably. That'd be ideal. Yeah.
I haven't thought about different locales in a few months now. So I've been so fiercely like wrapping around in my head a project of Chico.
Yeah.
Trying to more consciously grapple with, no, but seriously, how can I effectively use 10 years working on this place, or 5 years? Like, the world is going to shit. Can I help any piece of it be steered? And so that's been so creatively entertaining, and the place is so fucking beautiful that like I've been feeling really enriched and engaged in new and deeper ways without even fucking moving, just with like more firmly embracing these trees and this sky and this dirt. Okay, final question. One of my prompts. Can you guess what it's going to be?
Wizard shit?
Wizard shit. Of course.
All right. Let's do it.
What
was the prompt again?
Stuart is one of the like 9 wizards in Middle-earth.
Okay.
Like Gandalf has his shit, Radagast the Brown does his shit, Saruman the White cares hella about the Rings of Power and was more like a laboratory guy. And then there's Stuart, the blue.
The blue?
What's he doing? What's his like specialty?
I would like to be a maritime wizard.
Water. Okay, so Stuart the Blue, he's out in the water.
I want to live in a cave.
People have to go to a fucking ocean-sprayed cave to even talk to you?
Yeah.
Oh.
I want to live in a cave on like a desolate rock.
That's so magical.
And but it'll be like a cozy cave.
So like how Neptuned out have you gotten to? Like is coral growing on you? Or are you just in
I just look
clothes?
like a regular man. I just look like, I have like some dungarees and like probably some kind of like hemp clothing and I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing, but I think the only way, the way I can imagine this is basically if I were sort of cast away from society and living in a pre-industrial time and left to my own devices and became an old man, I just have to imagine who I would be in actuality. And
That's how you're getting there.
Yeah, that's how I'm getting this image, is I would find a remote location and somewhere by the seashore and survive. I think that's would be like I was thinking about this the other day, like, not in context of like what wizard would I be, but like I was asking Alicia this question. I was asking her like, and kind of asking myself at the same time. I was kind of bringing it up, like, if you didn't know anyone, and like this is dark, but like all your family was dead, all your friends were dead, you didn't have any connection, like no one knew your name, and you just were a person with a social security number and the choice to go on or not. What the fuck would you do? Where would you go?
That's equivalent to arriving on a brand new planet.
Yeah. Where would you, if you broke all context and ties with the past, in what way would your choices be different?
You're in a completely new dimension.
Are your opinions different now? Are your values different? Do you want to live in a different city? I think I would.
You'd live in a different city.
I think if I lost contact with everyone here and I didn't know anyone, and it's kind of hard for me to genuinely put myself in this place, because it's really sad if I'm actually gonna do this thought experiment. That's emotionally painful to rip myself from the context of who I am. But if I do it to the extent that I'm able to, kind of like knowing in the back of my mind that this is hypothetical, I think I would think my life would be completely different. Not necessarily better, but different. And it's an interesting thing to think about that, because I mean, I guess this is I'm just reframing this wizard question you asked me, basically. So,
you would have like ocean powers shit. Like, at the very least, even on your bad days, you'd be able to like talk to the ocean to some extent, if not like affect it in any way. And you could tell visitors, like, the ocean said this, watch out.
Well, Tolkien sort of leaves the ocean alone in his stuff, other than he sort of relegates it to the realm of the elves, which is this inaccessible realm. It's the veil. The ocean is the veil.
All mentions of the ocean as animated at all are in the Silmarillion.
Oh,
and
interesting.
A Neptune / Poseidon type equivalent of the Valar, which is what the higher gods are called for Tolkien, is like he helps make like the blood flow of Middle Earth, because his animating spirit and mind is in the oceans and in all the rivers that interpenetrate Middle Earth.
Yeah.
So help comes along to members of the different quests via water very often, and it's chalked up to the conscious love that this Poseidon guy has still for Middle Earth. So a blue wizard would like be more aware of different shit that ocean would pronounce from year to year. What do you think I would be doing though?
I was gonna ask you, wow, look at this fucking fly, that's cool. It's a different fly than I've seen.
Oh, it's mottled, like a forest, kind of.
Yeah. It's kind of like a half moth, half fly.
Yeah, do me.
Well, I got to define myself, so I think you get to define yourself as well.
But that's hard.
I know. Well, you're already a wizard, that's the problem. I feel like
I can start with that.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, what is reality? How is this reflected currently?
There's a definite healing effect that happens spontaneously but pretty rhythmically. The hands of a healer, Aragorn style. That happens. I distinctly enjoy being in this park by myself, stoned, and just having amazing psychological and physical experiences with my mind and with the animals and with trees at the same time. So that feels really magical.
Yeah.
Or like more native
Yeah.
to the kind of spiritual, what my spirit animal is doing anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that is magic. those kind of psychological experiences by yourself when you're stoned that's the closest thing to actual magic that exists.
Well, they're potential magic. They're certainly the gestures of your immovable mover.
The gestures of your immovable mover.
But the reality of it depends on later coming back to the village, quote unquote, and building some artifact of the experience.
I would say the objectivity of it depends on that. It's still real when it's in your mind.
You're right.
It's just as
You're
subjective.
right.
It's trapped.
It's completely valid. I wonder if, okay, I have a new spot over there. That's a new cool thing.
Yeah.
Like pointing at somewhere across the water. It's like, now that all these bums are cleared out of this specific park, like it's fun again to find little nooks and crannies because they're all clean now, and I'm claiming one to over time imbue it with my vibe and thus like make it more immune to vicissitudes of social bullshit.
You're gonna
protect the space, you know?
You're gonna put a hex on it.
Mm-hmm. And that hopefully makes it a more decorative, beautiful place of the forest, as well as being a hex.
You know what's a stupider version of the question you asked me?
Okay. What's the shape of your pitcher plant?
No, I was gonna say.
What color is it?
I was gonna say a more lowbrow question is what professor at Hogwarts would you be?
That's one of my wizard traits, is a professor of Hogwarts.
Professorial figure.
In the stranger ways of the multi-dimensions. I can teach you about those.
Would you be an asshole like Snape?
When it's necessary, yeah.
Yeah.
He was an abusive, hurt child as well as a stern teacher, so yeah, hopefully I would not be like Snape. Did you read Harry Potter?
Of course. Yeah.
Okay. So that's a place we've never gone before.
I'm of the age of when reading Harry Potter was still a thing.
Right there with you.
Yeah, you and I both are.
But so we've never had the Harry Potter
We've
conversation.
never gone down the Harry
That's
Potter.
Interesting.
The Harry Potter conversation. Yeah, no.
I can spell universe.
Funny how we've never broken into that vein.
Well, we've always thought it was too lowbrow, I think.
It's not that it is.
It's kind of amazing.
I sort of secretly, pretend to think it's lowbrow, but actually I think it's great. But it's one of those things that you have to introduce slowly. It's like, what kind of stuff are you into? Oh, Harry Potter? Oh, me too. Really? Oh my God, I can't believe I was afraid to tell you that I was into Harry Potter. Yeah, that's what Harry Potter is. At this point, Harry Potter used to be, I think that Harry Potter is like a thingy that it's one of the things that has marked millennials' consciousness.
I was so beautifully blessed and happy to be a part of that wave of culture that hit.
Yeah, it was a thing that
it's the thing we did together.
It's the thing that millennials came of age. It's a coming of age story of millennials, basically.
It failed its mission, though.
Or did we fail it?
No, J.K. Rowling's failed me so far. She's
failed you?
I've overachieved over her, but not an objective achievement, which is an amazing achievement of hers.
You know, J.K. Rowling is the only author who's ever become a billionaire from book sales. Or she's the only billionaire author.
Well, that
Isn't
only
that incredible.
That only highlights the tragedy of her fouling up the final bit. Then, it shows up.
How did J.K. Rowling foul up the final bit?
But optimistically, it shows up how keenly humanity knows the magic when it senses it.
Ah, interesting.
Like, we know it's there with Tolkien, and that says something good about the ability of our psyche to detect goodness.
Yeah.
And it's so hungry for some specific thing that's healthy and good, as evidenced by how successful J.K. Rowling is. She failed, though. The 7th book is a steaming pile of garbage. The 7th book should be the best book.
I read it when I was young.
It was the worst book.
And looking back, I don't know if it was... I never knew if me being disappointed was just because I lacked the maturity to appreciate it, or if it actually was a shitty book. But
It was a shitty book.
Yeah.
Your child, Stuart, is correct
yeah,
to be disappointed. So when I enjoy Harry Potter again, like the last time I did it was 2 years ago, all on audiobooks. Whole new dimension of enjoying it.
Wow.
I can't recommend it enough. As a whole different experience to the movies and the books is how well the audiobooks are performed.
Who performs the audiobooks?
Some badass, man.
Yeah.
He does so good.
British accent.
And British as fuck.
Brilliant.
A zillion different distinct British accents.
Brilliant.
But the 7th book sucks. When I enjoy Harry Potter, because I will for the rest of my life, I'm sure at regular intervals, I just read 1 through 6.
Yeah.
And then I make up how 7 should go as an exercise. That's how I do it from now on. Because 1 through 6 is this crazy blossoming of lots of cool stuff.
Yeah.
And, well, she came close, and it could have, like, saved our souls. But now we have to save our own souls, apparently. As millennials, I mean.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I think millennials will end up saving the world in some way.
I'm certain that a lot of us are authentically trying to.
Yeah.
And actually think they can move
Yeah.
that needle. Like, they actually believe it.
Yeah.
And they're doing it. And there's a good handful
Because
of them.
millennials actually were a very optimistic generation before getting punched in the face. They really were.
Of course.
And the same can't be said of Gen Z. Gen Z is sort of the opposite. Gen Z is a nihilistic, pessimistic generation, and they were trained to be that way. However, many of them are sort of their own accord deciding.
They've got some really cool cultural immunities.
They do. They
where
do.
They have just decided to be happy in certain areas.
Yes, they're just coming at it from a different. They're coming at a different from a different direction than millennials. So they're like, it's like a peak of a mountain. Millennials sort of like have this arc where we start high, and then there's like the low, and then we gotta get back. You know, it's like this bit of nostalgia feeling. Millennials hadn't understand nostalgia, and I think Gen Z is like sort of like they were like you said, they're kind of immunized against certain strains of disappointment because they're like, yeah, we're native to this shit, you know what I mean? And so it's like they...
Wow.
So their challenge is not to find their way back to the top, it's to find their way out of the forest in the first place. But when they do, they're going to be creatures of the forest, and they're not going to be threatened by disappointment anymore. So,
so beautiful,
millennials
Stuart.
are like optimistic and naive, and Gen Z is sort of like salty but capable, you know? So... I think millennials, though, will have to initiate some kind of hope, and then because we're the older ones, so
that's what I find myself doing in Chico. That's one of the projects of Chico ideas of why I haven't needed to travel. It's because I'm so engaged in fulfilling that little fantasy of a millennial that really turns the needle in a good way. It's so beautiful to find out that there's younger people under you, and you both have something of value to teach each other.
Yeah.
And you get older, and the effect increases if you've really been on your own grind. You have more to teach others.
Yeah.
It's fucking cool. And then it opens you up to ideas of what you can be taught by people older than you that you were closed to before.
Yeah, like baby boomers. My opinion of baby boomers has improved. I feel like I used to dismiss them out of hand because I thought it was cool or something, but
What changed? What did you observe that changed your mind?
I think it was probably just like sort of maybe a little bit more empathy of what it's like to have a stake in the world.
I feel that.
Yeah.
What it takes
or just
to
what
interact, to fuck with this world.
Yeah, like the idea of like a good life is something that I think baby boomers came down really on the nose with, and it defines them because they're sort of the avatar generation of post-war prosperity.
A good life is its own ends.
Yeah, and of course that's their positive aspect, and they created transcendent art, music, and cultural icons, experiences, a kind of like soft blanket of wrapping, the sort of like Americana is all baby boomers, or at least was most embraced by them, or most in media amplified by them. But I think there's something with millennials. They're kind of like, the baby boomers and millennials are sort of like this. They're both kind of like a major chord. Millennials were like the hero generation, the major chord, but instead of like the post-war revolutions, it was the internet. The millennials are the avatar generation of what the spirit of the internet actually is, and the spirit of the internet got punched in the face, just like millennials, and it got knocked down, and it got sort of knocked off of. It got like Empire Strikes Back, and it got sort of knocked off its course, and so like that's the millennials and the internet are sort of this little twins. They were born at the exact same time.
Yeah,
and they straddle the year 2000.
We nurtured the internet into existence ourselves with playing our fucking little flash games.
Terrence McKenna was our preschool teacher. Anything's possible. Yeah. So anything, you should live. The future's gonna be amazing. Really? Oh, I can't wait.
I remember playing slime volleyball. It's an amazing flash game you can play with 2 people on one keyboard.
Well, I've never heard of this.
And it's volleyball on the screen.
Oh, okay. Not a true millennial.
It loads in like no time, even on 56 whatever modem,
56K.
dial-up modem. And it's fun to play with your 8-year-old buddy on the keyboard.
It's funny how we think of 56K modem. That's only 56,000 pieces of information per second. Oh, so slow. Isn't that weird?
You just blew my mind so much.
56K.
So how many magnitudes is my like broadband at home now compared to that?
How many orders of magnitude larger?
Yeah. The number is like conservatively like 150 mg something.
Megabits. So let me think. So 50 megabits is 20 times less. 50 kilobits is 20 times less than 1 megabit. So if you have 100 megabits, that is 100 times 20. So that's 2,000 times faster.
2,000?
2,000 times faster. Yeah. 100 megabits. Yeah, because 50,000 versus 200 versus 100 million. So
back on 56K modem dial-up, I played RuneScape, the classic version of like 2D sprites over a 3D Java-made 3D landscape.
Java applet. Yeah.
And I did RuneScape, and I did AOL Instant Messenger with all my dudes and girlfriends.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember texting girls on that in computer class. That was cool.
Okay, I'm ready to eat.
Great.
Did we get to anything conclusive?
No. But it's okay.
It's AI and then forest AI and how AI affects artists and content creators, and forest AI.
Bat toilets.
And then to what kind of wizards would we be? And then
J.K. Rowling,
the fact of Harry Potter, and that our generation made Harry Potter viral because we lived that story. And now the failed ending of J.K. Rowling's 7th book reflects the burden millennials have now to deal with a real serious blow to their naive optimism.
Yeah.
And as they inherit the world, they must really correct things on an individual basis if they can at all.
Yeah.
Okay.